All right, I'm in Manhattan. I just spent the day watching the Jonathan Majors trial. As everybody knows, he was found guilty on 2 counts and not guilty on 2 counts. Split verdict by the jury. But I have to say, given the evidence at trial, particularly the video evidence and the text messaging evidence between Grace Jabbari and Jonathan Majors, I was really surprised at the result because you can kind of see from the video evidence. And by the way, New York is covered with New York NYPD cameras. And that's one of the reasons why this case had a lot of evidence that dealt with video evidence. So you had the scene of course, Jonathan Majors running away from Grace Jabbari all across Manhattan. And then you had another scene where you have Miss Jabari outside of Lucy's nightclub with some folks. And then inside the nightclub, of course, the nightclub has video inside of it as well. And that was put into evidence. And then there were 32 text messages from Miss Jabari to Jonathan Majors. I mean, so you had a great timeline of where everybody was, what everybody was doing. That makes it really easy to figure out uh, what's going on in terms of timing. And actually, those cameras, those public cameras, are very clear. So at any rate, though, the jury decided what they decided. 6-person jury with two alternates. And the forewoman was a white woman. There was no black people on jury except for one person, a black woman, who was probably a little over 50 years old. No black men on the jury. So the makeup of what you've got there really doesn't, I think, reflect the population of Manhattan. Now, some of that could have been that the jurors who were black were stricken by the prosecution, or it could have been that people didn't respond to their jury duty notice. That's a prevalent thing as well. So at any rate, the I think that this moment kind of, like I said, represents a change in policy with regard to Alvin Bragg's office, the Manhattan DA's office. Clearly, they're going to be prosecuting some things that were not prosecuted under Cyrus Vance or Robert Morgenthau. I would have actually said that there was anything about this case that made any sense in terms of coming into the courtroom on misdemeanor charges, which is highly unusual. And then you had the situation where Miss Jabari was arrested in the office. Alvin Bragg's office did not want to process and prosecute her arrest. So that was funny. That was odd. At any rate, this is this, and Jonathan Majors. They wanted to take this to court to prove their case. I think that they did not prove it as well as they could have, quite frankly. I mean, it was just a lot of evidence that Miss Jabari was the aggressor. Most of that evidence was put out there. A lot of that evidence was blocked by the judge and, of course, the prosecution. There was, the fact that we had a police detective that could not testify. I mean, he had a lot to say, and he was a perfect person to testify because he had contact with both sides of this story, Ms. Jabari's people and Mr. Majors, but she was not really allowed to. He was not really allowed to speak, and that was, I thought, highly problematic. And then you had the fact we couldn't hear the audio on the body cam footage. Why, I have no idea. So we had no idea what they were saying when they came over to Mr. Majors's residence. And of course, Mr. Jabari locked out Mr. Majors from his residence, and he ends up staying at a hotel uptown on 77th Street. But I thought there was a lot of de-escalation on his part. Everyone on the prosecution side arguing that, oh, he's the aggressor, he's this. There was no evidence of it. I mean, everything he was doing on March 25, 2023 was de-escalating. And that running down the street thing was the biggest de-escalation at all of all. I mean, I know it. I know Rolling Stone magazine found it very politically inconvenient and basically buried all that information because that wasn't with the political thing that they want to push. But it is a fact that we have video of Jonathan Majors running through Manhattan away from the person that he is supposed to be attacking. I mean, so that just made no sense. It was theater of the absurd, the idea that's somebody attacking somebody. And so anyway, we'll see what happens next in terms of an appeal. We'll see what happens next in terms of sentencing, which isn't until February. And that's it. It was interesting. interesting moment, obviously, when somebody is put on trial like this and the jury reads the verdict. The defendant has to stand up and face the jury. And when Jonathan Major stood up and they started reading, they was the first thing was not guilty and the second was guilty. And when that jury foreperson said guilty, she actually interrupted the clerk in the courtroom. She was so like wanting to say it so fast that she actually stepped on him. But when she said the word guilty, Jonathan Majors closed his eyes and put his head down a little bit. And he closed his eyes for a little bit. And then they got to the third count, which was not guilty. And then the fourth count was guilty. And then, obviously he looked pretty devastated. And to me, this is something that it will be easy. It will be very interesting to see in the future what cases Alvin Bragg chooses. Because if he chose this case, there's a lot of other cases that should be in play that would not necessarily be in play when it comes to harassment, assault, etc., and so on. Um, Again, I remain surprised that this made it into a courtroom. But until next time, I'm going to walk to Bryant Park and take. It's been a pleasure to deal with a lot of the other YouTubers on this topic. So shout out to Daniel Atherton. Shout out to Kat. Shout out to so many others. I learned a lot from the other channels, the other folks that are talking on this case. As I said, I'm late to the party. I just got into this last week. I'm really a lark, and so it's been interesting to watch. I've been in a lot of courtrooms, usually federal court. But thanks to everybody who has been sharing information because I know it's very time consuming. But people do a really good job of putting information together in a very short period of time. So thanks, and until next time, I'm Lauren Burke. Good luck.